Um, Leo, I take it you've, after all the talking about who's the actual underdog throughout the week, with both sides, I think, having got that status. Now that
Race to
you've
the bottom.
yeah, exactly. Now that you've seen their team, um, what's your what's your reaction to the perceived strength of the team they've named? And then secondly, when there's one or two players you probably haven't had too much time to have a look at in terms of analysis, how does that make you feel sort of from a prep perspective?
Okay, yeah, like they're a pretty settled team, though, aren't they? The Bulls, like they haven't changed drastically from what we would have expected. So, um, yeah, like you go on the website, like it's a big squad they have, isn't it? Like what, over 60 players, which is a hell of a lot more than what we would have. And Jake has added to the group over since last season. If you think, like, in terms of a couple of the marquee guys they have brought in, Vili, LaRue and Vilcalo, probably those two in particular, that definitely add a bit of that top end experience and quality. So, um, yeah, I think when you go through a course of season, like it's a long season, isn't it? So there has to be a lot of management that goes on to ensure that you can be firing at this end of the season. Um, and yeah, listen, as I said, like Bulls have been able to navigate their way pretty well. So, obviously they made some decisions around Champions Cup. Clearly, when you think back to the team, say that would have been sent up to play against Northampton in the quarterfinals. Obviously, we played La Rochelle that weekend. Um, and Jay clearly has his eyes set on URC. So, um, some of the guys, obviously, they're here today, as are playing tomorrow, should I say, like didn't travel for that game as an example. So, yeah, like I think Jake has had a pretty clear intention as to what his focus is this year. So we know that they've been waiting for this day, which is a semi final at home. So it's going to be a great challenge for our guys. Our guys are know it's going to be a serious challenge. When you walk in the front door there and you turn left and you see the the history wall. I love a good history wall, so I do. Um, and listen, as somebody personally who would have watched so much of, particularly Super Rugby, and we wouldn't have seen maybe as much as the Curry Cup from in our part of the world. Um, but in terms of particularly Super Rugby, and think of some of the great Bulls teams, and a lot of our guys would have grown up with that. So that's why it's an amazing challenge for us to be here um, at this stage of the competition, isn't it? Like a semi final, whereas like it was just we sort of would have dreamt of that, if I wind the clock back 20 years. So it's fantastic to be here. Amazing, iconic stadium and serious challenge we have.
There's been so much talk about in sort of recent weeks. There's so much talk about, obviously, I think this being your first playoff game outside of home, and obviously the the unfortunate results in recent years. It almost kind of makes you guys sound like some kind of sort of mental case. But what I want to ask is how do you sort of try to manage that and just get on with the fact that you've got a game to win.
Yeah, like this is our sixth playoff game this season, so our sixth knockout game. So what if we've got through a last 16 quarterfinal, semi final of the Champions Cup? It was a quarterfinal last week in this competition. We lose a final. It's unbelievably tight game. Toulouse are a top team, as we all know. It's on the day. If you wind back the clock, obviously we haven't won a trophy this season or the previous two seasons, but you go back the previous 4 seasons, we've won 5 trophies in those 4 seasons. So, again, it depends how far you want to go back. And then, seasons prior to that, we had a couple of seasons where we didn't win anything. Seasons prior to that, we did win some trophies prior to that. So, again, it just depends on how long you want to extend out the timeline. The reality is it's very, very competitive when you get to knockout games. So you need to make sure you get lots right on the day. And that's always been our focus. So, we got lots right in the Champions Cup final, but there was some things we didn't get right. And that's probably the learning for this group to make sure we're better now that we're in a playoff game again. So, we've come through, as I said, the quarterfinal. You lose a final. There's the natural disappointment. We made quite a few changes, which is the last game for us in the RDS, which is our home stadium. Before there's a redevelopment that's going to take place there, so we moved to the Aviva Stadium for a quarter final, which again provincial game, derby game against Ulster. and obviously we've travelled here, which is a completely unique experience, but one that the group is excited by and has openly embraced the challenge. So, but it's on the day now, isn't it? So, we'll see two good teams going at it, and there'll be lots of little subplots. What's going to be like in terms of scrum battle, line out drive battle, the contact area battle, the aerial battle, who's able to retain possession best, who's able to play in the right areas of the field, who's able to put pressure on some of the various different individuals from both teams. So, and that's the game of rugby, isn't it? So there's no, we've all these got preconceived ideas of what we think is going to happen, but then we've got to be able to deal with what happens on the day and what unfolds. So, the guys are prepared well. Obviously it's a unique challenge when you're traveling and all the rest, but it's been good for the group, I think, in terms of that time together. So, we'll see what it looks like in terms of the actual performance. But for us, listen, it's just embracing another challenge now. And where else would you rather be? You know what I mean? Like, where else would you rather be? It's great, isn't it? Where would you like to? You come over to us.
So we'll go MW, Carl, RG, and finish off with Stephen.
Jake's talked a lot about the travelling. You mentioned that finding tickets at Saturday night for 45 guys to fly to South Africa, and you guys arrived here in drips and drabs and likes, and that's a challenge that we've been putting up for quite a while now, and Jake's been adamant about that. The North African game we talked about was one of those things that we really struggled to get our guys there, and we were lucky that there was some flights available with the Stormers losing to La Rochelle and the likes. But how did you experience this travelling thing? Is it such an issue, or do you not think it's a bit of a storm in a teacup?
Yeah, like it's okay. Like, isn't it? It's because there's the big thing is like in terms of time zones and the jet lag. So there's none of that effect. So yeah, like as in, like, particularly from the players' point of view, listen, they've travelled in decent seats, and some of the staff were a bit wedged in the back, but we're all right. Like we've seen the alternative in terms of our league, like in terms of the development of the competition. So to have the four big South African franchises in the competition, like it's unbelievable for us, and the interest in the game that's here. And we're still very early days in terms of competition, but it's definitely worth the little bit of some of the travel challenges, but it's worth the little bit of pain for what the actual reward is, which is for us to be in a venue like this in a game of this magnitude, or vice versa if any of the four South African teams are playing in a knockout game in the Northern Hemisphere. And I just think you'll see the competition grow and grow and grow. So listen, I think it's fantastic. I don't, like it's not the easiest thing to do last minute, but the alternative, it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative, I think, because in terms of the level of the competition now, there's some unbelievable playoff games I think you've seen.
And play 16 year, the crowd that we're expecting here at Loftus, how do you expect to cope with that?
Good question. Yeah, like, and that's the thing. We're in a away hostile environment, and we just need to embrace that. So, I think we just get excited by that challenge. So, like in terms of Champions Cup in particular, like you go away to particularly you think somewhere like some of the knockout games in France and what that's like, and you're used to that type of hostile crowd and the pressure that puts on teams and the lift it can give a home team. So, it's something that the players have experienced plenty. A number of players obviously involved in Six Nations games and similar big stadiums, packed out, hostile environments, etc. So, but again, that's just another layer. Again, go back to the experience. Like, where would you rather be? Like, isn't this exactly it? Playing away semi-final of a competition knockout with a team again like the Bulls that they are, the history that they have in knockout competition, Super Rugby and Currie Cup as well over the years, and so there's a real sort of feeling of privilege for us to be here, and I suppose with that comes a lot of excitement, and there's the anticipation now, a bit of the nervous energy that we have, and like we're respectful of the history that's here, but it's making sure that we go out and perform and do ourselves justice, and all the people who have supported us this year that are not here, that tune in to watch us play. You think, we've, as I said, this is our sixth knockout game now this season. So, working back from last week, prior to that, we lost the final in London where we had, 30 or 40,000 Leinster fans travel to London to watch that game. You know, prior to that, we would have played Northampton in semi-final, whereas 83,000 people turned out to watch us in Dublin in Croke Park, which is again an iconic venue, and we had a couple of games in the Aviva Stadium prior to that. So we've had unbelievable support all during the course of the season. So a little bit more challenging for supporters to get here last minute. But there was a couple of supporters we had there watching the captain's run there, so which was great to see them. And we know that we have this fantastic support at home, and a lot of our players have come through the system where they've come through clubs and schools within the Leinster region. So you want to just see guys perform now and do themselves justice and make the people that support them all during the course of the season, but over the course of their careers proud as well. So hopefully you'll see a little bit of that.
Thank you.
You are aware that the Bulls are going to allow the spectators tomorrow to bring in oranges and tins and that kind.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
For you, not a good thing. If both teams keep to their structures and play according to the plans and everything, it's going to be a tight game. What do you see as the single factor, if you can do that will determine who wins and who loses?
Well, for all its complexity, the game of rugby, it's a simple enough game as well. So I think that's the contact area is probably the big thing, isn't it? So, which is the collision between the attackers and the defenders. So, whichever side of the ball that you're on. So, whoever wins some of those that contact point, and I think that'll go a hell of a long way to winning the game, obviously. But that's sort of the game over the course of time, isn't it? But it's the contact point, So it's being clever around some of that as well. So it's not necessarily you need to be direct running into people, but it's how good you are in terms of some of that collision part or that contact part between attack and defence. So again, we've got some good guys that have some good evasion skills and good footwork and making sure you utilise some of those skills. But I think that's the big thing in the game, isn't it? Between who comes out on top between that contact area.
And comparing your semi-final tomorrow and the one in the Champions Cup.
As in Northampton, you mean?
Yeah.
Northampton, again, going back, you think how we sort of managed that period. If you think, so we played La Rochelle in the quarter-final Champions Cup, and then we leave to go to South Africa on the Wednesday with probably a younger group, really. I thought we had plenty of experience within that group as well, so we were disappointed how we performed, particularly in that Lions game. We had a younger probably group that played against the Stormers, so then we had Northampton the week after, so we were a little bit cold maybe going into that Northampton game. It was the feeling. We started the game well, scored a couple of good tries, I thought. Northampton came back towards the end, and I think Northampton have shown, even by winning the Premiership, the quality that they have in their team. So, different challenge because the style of team that Northampton are versus the Bulls probably. There's the conditions. Again, our guys they've experienced plenty now. If you think since that game, and so we played Ospreys post that game, rotated some of the group, played the final. Rotated some of the group, played the quarterfinal, so we're back at it again. So again, it's just another knockout game, but you need to get so much right in terms of these games because it's on the day and who's got the best prep during the course of the week, who's clearing the plan and who's able to really properly execute on the plans. Because again, it'll still come back to some of those physical contact points during the course of the games. So I thought we got a lot right in that Northampton game, but it's just a totally different type of challenge, isn't it, today?
My final question, if I may, Lunga, is it possible, in your view, that you can win the URC and the Champions Cup in 1 year?
Is it possible? Definitely, yeah. So we would have, we were very close to win the Champions Cup, fellas. As I said at the time, there was a drop goal we had at the end. If we'd gone, 2 feet to the right, we'd be sitting here as Champions Cup, winning team. Getting ready to play a semi-final. Whether we'd win this game or not, I don't know. Would that make a difference? But we'll find out afterwards. But it's hard, isn't it? It's fighting on 2 fronts is hard. And that's why some of the decisions around, managing the group, because if you think we've come off the Six Nations and we're 13 games in a row since then. If you go to a final, it was 14 games. So that's probably slightly longer than what we would have had traditionally. This last block of the season used to be only 10 weeks, whereas now it's 14 weeks. So if you think it used to be the June test, now it's the July test. So it's unusual for us to play rugby, provincial rugby, in June, because normally the season's finished at the end of May. So when we started playing Pro 12 and Pro 14 after that, the final would have been at the end of May. So it's not impossible, because in 2018 we were able to do the double. Granted, it was without the South African teams, so we obviously have done it in the past, a double, with the travel and all that goes with it. It just makes it more challenging. Is it impossible? No, of course it's not impossible. But yeah, it's bloody hard. But you can see with the teams, obviously some teams get knocked out of, say, Champions Cup, so they're able to rest up and fill up the fuel tanks, so to speak, whereas other teams truck on. So obviously we've been trying to truck on every week, and that's the challenge. That's what we want to do. So it's hard, and that's why maybe some teams do what they do. But for us, we'd still be as ambitious as always, and try to go after a few competitions, because we value them very, very strongly. So and they're fantastic challenges to go after, aren't they? Great challenges.
Coach, I mean, how do you sort of keep the guys mentally in tune following the disappointment of the Champions Cup final, and also again knowing that many of them will be involved against the Springboks in a few weeks' time? How do you sort of keep them in tune on this?
Well, they're a very ambitious group for starters, and like we try to do our best in terms of the management of the group over the course of the season. And at some stages during the year, you give young guys opportunities, which again is fantastic, because again, we're producing more often than not guys have come through the system. So we're not really bringing a huge amount of guys from outside of Leinster. So, but over the course of the season, yeah, like we're trying to make sure guys are mentally fresh, so they're able to fire. And when it gets to knockout games, off the back of the disappointment, last year we lost the Champions Cup final and we had no game afterwards. So it's almost like we were relieved to be able to turn our attention to something quite quickly. And there's always a little bit of this emotional sort of, you're on a bit of a roller coaster to a certain extent. And that's something that we've discussed. So I think you've seen, a period where obviously the Connacht game the week after, we were able to make some changes to get a bit of freshness into the group. You saw some good parts to our performance last week, but there's lots of parts of our performance we need to try and improve on, and that's been the focus. So it's that sort of continuous improvement that the group are after. So yeah, no, good challenge. But this is because it's a new challenge completely. A lot of guys wouldn't have been here before. It's something that they're excited about embracing, and the time away together, and it's great. Like, so we're excited by it, but we understand that it'll be bloody hard as well. Sorry, I'm drawn to that last question. My mind was still thinking back to that, because I watched obviously the Stormers La Rochelle game, because we were waiting to see who would get on the plane to travel. Obviously La Rochelle won at the death, or well, as in the kick could have won the game at the very death. And obviously seeing the Stormers at the end, and that was John Dobson what he said. The only saving grace is they don't have to play next week. So because remember, if they lost a good few guys through injury that day. But that just shows you how hard it is, isn't it? When you're up against some of the top teams, and but that's the beauty, We're still little old Ireland, so we are. You guys are the big boys. We're a very small rugby nation. We sit well behind in terms of game popularity. I think we've soccer, Gaelic football. Marcus is a Gaelic footballer, so he was. Kilmore Crokes, very successful team in Dublin. And hurling as well, and that's the challenge for us. So we're trying to punch above our weight.
I will definitely not repeat it in Dublin when I get there.
Okay, boys. Thank you. Cheers.